Welcome to the Indie Film Puzzle Podcast, episode number 285. In Hollywood, a good friend is someone who stabs you in the face. Anonymous.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your sick but humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Blackbox. Blackbox is a new platform and community that is all about financial freedom for filmmakers like you. If you join Blackbox, you will be transformed from being a worker to being a maker of your own content, and you'll be making steady passive income from the global market. Blackbox currently allows you to upload your stock footage once, get it to many global agencies, and then allows you to share that passive income stream with your collaborators. Whether you want to submit old footage that's been sitting around in your hard drives or create brand new content, Blackbox is for you. It's really quite revolutionary. With Blackbox, filmmakers can concentrate on making great content while Blackbox takes care of all the business BS. Just visit www.blackbox.global to find out more. And today's show is also sponsored by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. If you want access to filmmaking documentaries, feature films about filmmaking, interviews with some of the top screenwriters and filmmakers in Hollywood, as well as educational online courses all in one place, IFH TV is for you. Just head over to indiefilmhustle.tv. Guys, first, I want to apologize for not putting out a fresh podcast last week. I was sick. I'm recovering, as you can hear it in my voice. I got that sexy Barry White voice right now. And I wasn't able to crawl to my podcast station last week, but I was able to get a Throwback Friday out for people, which is a great episode as well. So I am back. We're going to get 2 fresh episodes this week. And I'll also be doing a fresh episode of the Bulletproof Screenplay podcast as well. Now, guys, we also have a ton of cool stuff happening with Indie Film Hustle TV. It is growing by leaps and bounds. Thank you guys so much for all the support. I'm going to be releasing new content every week, and I'll be releasing those trailers for the up-and-coming titles, courses, movies, documentaries, interviews coming out this week on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, on Twitter, and anywhere else you guys follow us. I'll be putting up those trailers so you guys can check those out. And I will have, of course, an update episode starting at the beginning of the new year. Now, let's get into today's episode. Today's guest is Josh Doke, who is a writer-director who made the film Goodland. Now, what made his story unique is he actually did something I had never seen before or heard before, is community filmmaking, where he literally got his entire town behind him to help him make the movie and added an amazing amount of production value, which far exceeded his indie budget, let's say. And it was a pretty remarkable story, and I wanted to hear how he was able to galvanize his entire town behind him, which is a little town called Goodland in Kansas, in the middle of the country, and also how he was able to get free stuff, get a car for $1 from the local used car dealer, and so many other things. And then we also discuss his distribution strategy, how he's getting the movie out there, how he was able to do theatrical runs, and so on of the film. And it's been a very, very successful little indie movie. But how he made it and how he got it out there is quite unique. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Josh Doke. I'd like to welcome to the show Josh Doke, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex.
So I wanted to, first of all, before we get started, how did you even get started in the film business?
Oh, man. I was back in high school. I was on the football team, and I wanted to make a highlight film, for our football team. And we're talking like 2006, 2007. We were on like DV cams. I was converting on Final Cut Pro and putting it to some really bad music, I'm sure. And we only had the one camera in our small high school stadium, which would have been like
which was
the high cam.
Which one was it?
It was like the high camera, you know, it was like
the one angle.
The one angle. So you're cutting in and
But what was the camera? Do you remember the
cool.
camera? What was it? Was it the Canon? Was it the DVX?
I think it was a JVC actually.
Oh,
it was bad.
It was rough. That's rough.
But I was in an art class and I told my art teacher that I wanted to do this, and we actually had Final Cut at our high school. So he just kind of threw me, and this is showing my age a little bit, but this was a little bit before YouTube tutorials.
Dude, don't talk to me about age, okay? I mean, in 2005, I was not in high school, so let's just put it that way.
So he threw me the actual Final Cut manual and told me to figure it out. So that's kind of how I learned in editing. I was always drawn to art and story. I thought I'd be a writer for a while. I was always drawing. I wanted to be a cartoonist for a while, and it kind of just like transformed into film. And so when I was like 17 or 18, I told my parents that I wanted to go to film school. And I'm one of the fortunate ones who have the type of parents that when they heard that, they said like, go for it. And they really supported me. So
same here.
From that point on, I started looking for film school, and I grew up in Western Kansas, in the middle of
the Mecca of Hollywood. Yes. Got it. Mecca. Yeah. Yes.
And then I went to that prestigious film school that is the University of Kansas.
Obviously it's up there with USC and NYU, of course.
Better known for their basketball than for their film program. Although I'm not dissing their film program. It's just not on many people's radar.
Yes, exactly. Very good politically way to say it. Yes. But you learned the basics there. You learned the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. And what came out of it, I had a lot of great instructors. In fact, Kevin Wilmot was one of my professors. He taught me the art of screenwriting, and he actually co-wrote Black Klansman with Spike Lee. He's still teaching at the University of Kansas. So.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was really great to kind of like learn under him and be able to take all the classes that he offered. And so, but what it really did for me was it introduced me to my business partners and collaborators, Ian Trimble, who's my director of photography, and Edward Schroer, who is my editor. And we together make up Rockhaven Films, which is our production company.
Nice, man. So then how did Goodland come to life? Because this is your first debut feature film. Yeah,
it's the first one. So I chose going to the University of Kansas because I had some in-state scholarships. I knew that I wanted to keep the cost down low because I knew that the end goal was to always make real films. I wanted to make a film. And I kept that all the way through college. Met Ed and Ian. We started a production company, and we had a lot of, like I said, connections around the Kansas City area, Lawrence, where the University of Kansas was, with a lot of different production companies and access to things that you might not be able to get. I hear you can get a lot of stuff, if you go to the prestigious film schools, but we were just like working and making friends with all these companies outside of the actual university. So I felt like we had a plethora of resources right there. We had everything that we needed to make a film. So we decided that we were going to make our first feature film. We weren't going to ask for anybody's permission. We were just going to do it there in Kansas and use that as our stepping stone onto, to hopefully launch our careers and make more films in the future. So initially I started working on a script, and it was a Western script. We were trying to keep the budget low, and we started looking into what the insurance cost would be with horses and putting actors on horses. We realized that wasn't going to, at least what we had envisioned, needed to be maybe 3 or 4 films down the line.
Right.
Probably not the first one. So knowing that, we kind of went back to the drawing board, and I had this idea for what became Goodland when I was about 17, growing up in a small town of about 4,000 people. And I had this like just high concept idea at a very young age. And then when we were actually talking about making this film practically, that idea kind of came back up, and I was like, I know how to do this, and I know that we can do this now, with the amount of money that we can raise and all the resources we have. I know that this film could be made now. So I took about 4 months, really fleshed out that idea and wrote the first draft of the script. Brought in a producer, J.S. Hampton, who's also worked with Wilmot on several other of his earlier projects. and kind of got the ball rolling in what became Goodland.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. So tell us a little bit about Goodland. What is Goodland?
So Goodland is I always call it a small town crime thriller. Mm-hmm. It's kind of has some neo-Western vibes to it, but it's primarily about a drifter who comes through town, and a very small town, and ends up dead in a cornfield, and it's made to look like a farm accident. And then the local sheriff, played by Cinnamon Schultz, starts investigating and realizes that the accident isn't so much of an accident, and that there's more going on. And this kind of all coincides with another character coming into the town who's posing as a photographer, and she starts to kind of chase down the leads and figure out that there's more going on than just a random act of violence.
Now, there's a unique story on how you made this film, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
So can you tell me, when you reached out to me, you were telling me about how you pretty much rallied the entire town around your production. And that was a very interesting concept, because there are a lot of small towns in this country and also outside of this country. And where people Robert Rodriguez kind of did that with El Mariachi. Right. Right. He kind of gathered, he's like, I know this Mexican town I can go and shoot in. And he gathered the locals and stuff. How did you do it, and what's the story behind that? Right. Yeah. And I know that, as you were saying, this isn't the most unique of stories, in that, I read Robert Rodriguez's film Rebel Without a Crew. Right. I remember I was a college student, probably not as good of a college student as I could have been, because I got that book and I skipped classes for 2 days and just paced my dorm room for 2 days, just racking my brain. It just that book blew off the doors of what, I thought I had to do to make a movie. Yeah, but that book is pretty seminal in our world, in the filmmaking world. Right. So that's not that unique. I think a lot of people know about that book and have heard these stories before and all that. But I did practically apply that, but I took it another step further, I think, in what became kind of a case study for, what a film could potentially do. So Goodland is a real town. It's the town that I grew up in. It's the town that my parents still live in. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I wanted to set this story in a small western Kansas town, very underrepresented, obviously, as we kind of joked about earlier, in any type of film. So I thought it was a unique setting. Sure. A lot of people think it's very kind of boring and barren, but for me, for a cinematic eye, I thought there was a lot of beauty to the wide open spaces. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I wanted to do that. So when I had that in mind when I wrote the script, and I also wrote the script, like we said, with Robert Rodriguez, thinking about the places that I knew I had access to, locations that I grew up around, mm-hmm. things that I knew that people who still lived in the town could give us access to, which were vehicles and any type of thing, that we needed. I knew that, or had a good idea that we could probably get that. Mm-hmm. And then when it came down to I wrote the first draft of the script, and I had, some working name on the script. And my producer was like, no, we should name this Goodland. I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, I don't know if that's, and he's like, well, to you, it's the name of your hometown, but it actually fits pretty well with the themes of the film. It's a cool name. I think that it's catchy. I think it'll work. So Jay was right. We called it Goodland, and we saw the benefits of doing that right out of the gate. We ran a Kickstarter to get get a final push, before going into production. We had most of our funding in place, but we needed just that little extra kick that you oftentimes do. Mm-hmm. So we ran a Kickstarter, and I was not expecting it to do what it did. And not that we made an obscene amount of money, but just the spread on social media, having a film called Goodland, and also being connected with so many people from my hometown. Mm-hmm. Anybody who had lived in Goodland, lives in Goodland, has driven through Goodland, lives in a town around Goodland, mm-hmm. shared the Kickstarter, because they had never had a film, knew nothing, about the filmmaking process, had never had a film
shot in or around or knew anything about it, and just thought it was amazing that we wanted to bring a film crew in and make this film in a small town, and not only just make it, but also call it Goodland. So it ended up being like an unforeseen marketing advantage.
Very savvy.
Yeah, well, in hindsight, we can claim genius, but in reality, you know, Jay thought it was a good title. He may tell you differently. He had this all worked out in the back of his head. But so we did that, and it spread, and we were over half our goal within 24 hours of launching Kickstarter. And a lot of people that I knew, obviously, I think you think a lot of friends and family are going to help with Kickstarter, but way beyond that, people who I may have recognized their names or had some slight contact, or, you know, I was on the phone with my parents every night being like, do you know so-and-so? And they're like, oh yeah, they work down the street. They, you know, and people were excited and they were getting involved. And to take a step even further back than that, I actually wanted to clear everything with everybody in the town of Goodland before I just like took their name and slapped it on something.
Right.
And the first people I went to were my parents. As I said, they still work and live there. It's their community. So I went to them. I said, I wrote this script. This is what I want to do. I want to call it Goodland. Do you guys support this? And they said, go for it. So with their permission, I then went and spoke at like the city council meetings. I spoke local Kiwanis Club. I'm not sure if everybody knows what the Kiwanis Club is, but
I have no idea what the Kiwanis Club is.
Local community organizations. I'm sure you could imagine. You know, so just several different local community organizations. I went and did talks at the high school. I spoke to art classes and their media classes. I got permission from the sheriff's department and the police department. In fact, they ended up actually helping out with the production of the film. So by the time we launched this Kickstarter, a lot of people already knew about it. A lot of people didn't, but I had the town in full support, or at least the main players in the city of Goodland to kind of help.
So let me ask you though, in your opinion, do you think if you would have called it something else, do you think it would have gotten the same reaction?
I think I would have gotten the same reaction as far as the support from the town. I think that the name really helped people. I think when people are scrolling through social media, and they see like this new branded name of a town on a movie poster or something, they stop maybe than if I would have called it, you know, like, I don't know, 3 Bullets in the Wind. I have no idea what I would call the movie, but you know what I mean? Like it was just some esoteric title.
So you're telling me that this is not going to work in Los Angeles?
Probably not. I think that's probably you need to find a small community outside of Los Angeles and totally rally them.
So I can call this Sacramento, maybe. I don't know.
Hey, Sacramento might actually go for it.
So then, in your opinion, then why do you think the town kind of rallied around you? Was it just because it was like, you know, local boy makes good? He's, you know, trying to bring, you know, I mean, what's the benefit? I mean, obviously, you know, the marketing of the movie's name and everything, but why do you think they got? I mean, because I'm trying to understand the mentality of it, because hopefully other filmmakers can kind of use that for their path.
Well, first and foremost, I will say that I was very upfront about the type of film I was trying to make. I knew I was coming in shooting an R-rated thriller that had, you know, mature themes. And so I wanted to put that out front. I didn't want anybody thinking I was making a talking dog Disney movie, you know, and then
there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
They make a lot of money, of money.
And absolutely. I'm not talking bad about that type of movie. I just didn't want there to be a shock after the fact when people finally saw the movie and
we got behind this porno. What is this?
I didn't quite take it that far, but you know, I did want them to know what it was. And I had a little bit of anxiety about that, to be honest, like going into this, knowing that the script I wrote, I could stand behind. It wasn't embarrassing in any way, but you know, it's like, you know, my parents have to live there after I bring a film crew in and like storm in for 17 days and then we're out. And then my parents have to like live there. So, you know, I was conscious of all that. But yeah, to get back to your initial question about like, why do I think people rallied behind this? I think being honest and being upfront really did help. I think that people were excited to see someone taking the initiative and doing something like this.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Especially in a place that a lot of people really care about. You know, I think there's a lot of people who are very proud of the community that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they sometimes think, like I said, that it's kind of like like an under, you know, people just kind of write off Kansas as a whole, let alone Western Kansas. No one even knows where that is. So when someone pays attention and calls their film by that name and draws attention to it in what seems like a positive light, I think people were excited about that. And I think people outside of the major cities of, you know, New York and Los Angeles are still enamored with the filmmaking process. You know, it's not something everybody gets to see every day. I think as filmmakers, we normalize it. And in a city like Los Angeles, everybody has to normalize it. They're forced. It's on their doorstep day in and day out. Mm-hmm. But in a place like Goodland, you know, we had just people come to set every day and just watch us do what we do. They just wanted to be a part of it and see the process. They had no idea how a movie was made. They had no idea that you had to shoot, you know, from 3 or 4 different angles to get coverage for a single scene. You know? Just the process just was, you know, exciting.
Mind blowing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, because I originally come from a smaller town. Miami or Fort Lauderdale area outside of Miami is still a fairly large, well-known area, but compared to Los Angeles, it's a small town. Right. You know, a lot of people, you know, when I started shooting there too, they would do the same thing. They just like, I just want to like, what? I want to see it. Yeah. I still remember bringing my father to set for the first time when I was shooting a commercial, and he had no idea what I did. Even 15, 20 years in, still, he's like, "You make money? Good. That's all I care about." and when I brought him in, he looked around and he was so impressed that everybody was listening to me.
Right. Yeah.
He went back to tell my relatives, like, everyone was listening to Alex. I mean, he would just tell them to do something and they would move this gear and they would just, I'm like, that's just, we're collaborators. But okay, fine. But if that makes you work, fine.
Right. And it's funny at different people's perceptions. You know, my brother, you know, grew up at exactly the same household and way that I did. And I've involved him in a lot of my projects throughout the years. He's cheap labor. He was an EMT and firefighter, so he had access to a lot of things that were really cool to film.
Very valuable. Very always valuable.
Looping my brother into things, and I know that he's a doer. So like when there's a lot of people like perceive that there's nothing happening on a film set when actually there's a lot of stuff happening on the film set. It's like, why aren't you shooting right now? It's like, well, we're moving lights, this stuff's happening, those people are doing things, we're waiting for this, we're waiting for that. Like everybody's doing what they're doing, but the cameras aren't rolling. So sometimes for people it's perceived as like, you could do this so much faster if you just kept going.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not going to look right if you don't reset the lights and move things around and do it 18 times.
Right. Exactly. Everyone's a Monday morning quarterback. Everybody's a Monday morning. Everyone's a backseat driver. Yeah. Like, for me, it looks so easy. I could do that.
Yeah. There's this quote that I always say when people, say they weren't expecting what they saw on a film set. There's this quote by William Goldman, wrote Princess Bride,
of course,
and such. He says that the most exciting day of my life was my first day on a film set, and the most boring day of my life was every other day on a film set after that.
He's absolutely right. The first day is super exciting, and then after that, you're just like, this is work. It's still work.
Absolutely.
Now, you had a lot of stuff donated for your film. So you had even food. People were like,
we did.
Can you, like, how did that happen? Because food actually, if you want to borrow my car, that's one thing. But if you want to I'm spending money to support you by cooking and stuff. How would that work out?
Well, it's funny. My mom really threw herself into wanting, she found out the term crafty and she loved it. So she threw herself into craft services.
Okay.
But she also recruited and asked other people, if they wanted to help out, or, she owns her own business on Main Street of the town, and a lot of people were interested coming in talking. Some people had missed the Kickstarter or just were wondering how they could get involved, or if that we needed anything, or if they could help. And food was always an easy way to kind of, if someone wanted to chip in, a film crew will always eat. Always eat more.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was an easy way to kind of get some people involved who were interested in wanting to help.
Now, can you tell me the story of the 1990 Crown Vic?
Yes. So we were coming up to shooting, and I actually hit a good streak of luck when Holton Whitman, a kid from my hometown, he's a few years younger than me, filmmaker. He actually just happened to be back in our hometown during the time that we were filming. And I was, just to give some perspective, our studio was 5.5 hours away from our location. So we were on location, not where we normally operate our business. Mm-hmm. So we were bringing everybody out that 5.5 hour drive, putting everybody up. But there was a lot of things that I was going back and forth on that 5.5 hour drive, constantly. Mm. So to have someone that I trusted in Goodland, in the town that we were about ready to shoot, leading up to the shoot full time, was amazing. Like, I didn't plan for that. It just kind of like fell into my lap, and it ended up being like, I don't know what we would have done without that. And part of that was we were looking at several different vehicles to use as our cop car. A lot of our film takes place in a sheriff's office, and we knew that we needed a car to represent that. There's a lot of driving scenes. And so we were looking at various, a lot of times they retire these cop cars and then they just sell them at auction for very cheap. Mm-hmm. We allotted, a certain amount of budget, but I always wanted to have that kind of more classic square looking box cop car. There was some other cars that were coming up that were a little newer model, the white, kind of like 2000s probably version that everybody knows. And that would have worked, and we would have had a cop car and it would have been fine. But we looked at two, and we had two on our radar. And the day before we had to pull the trigger and actually, purchase the car to take it in to get it repainted and made to look like how we wanted it, a car showed up on the lot of the local Ford dealership. And it was a 1990 Crown Vic. It was exactly the model that I had in mind when I wrote the script. I even had reference stills from other films of the cop car that I wanted. And I was, as David Fincher says, filmmaking is compromise. And I was going to compromise to have a cop car because we needed it and we were coming down to it. But the day before, this 1990 Crown Vic shows up on the lot. So we go to talk to the dealer about what they would need. And they were super excited about the film, super excited. And Dan Brenner Ford of Goodland, Kansas, ended up selling this Crown Vic to the production for $1 to transfer the name over into my insurance so that we could get it tagged, and essentially donating the cop car towards the cause.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I never expected that. I almost couldn't take it, I told them that they have free commercials whenever they're ready for them. They haven't cashed it in yet, but I hope they will someday in the future because I want to warrant that.
Oh, that's amazing.
So then Holton, who became my associate producer, his grandfather was auto body paint by profession. And so they took it in, and in a matter of a week, it came out looking like a 1990 Crown Vic sheriff car.
That's
amazing. And then we
amazing.
even had the local sheriff department donated the light bar that goes on top.
That's amazing, man. That really is. Isn't it crazy though? Like how the universe kind of shows up to help you as soon as you start the process. It won't open the door. Sometimes it'll open the door, but if it sees that you're doing it and you're going to flow, it'll come in and assist.
Right.
Like these little magical moments, like your buddy coming back to town, like this car coming back to town, like, the name Goodland. Like you wouldn't even expect that. I can see all this kind of like almost miraculous coincidences along the way while making this. Isn't it incredible?
That's very much how it felt. It felt like just like things were just falling into place right when they needed to. Right before I was about to stress out to the max. I was plenty stressed as my family and girlfriend can attest to. But
we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Right before we hit like critical mass, something would fall into place that would make it okay. And it's interesting how that happens, but I think it's just like just putting your head down and just like continuing to work towards something. And also, I'm a proud person. I don't like to ask for a lot of help sometimes. It's not natural for me to ask for help. I always feel like I'm putting people out. Like I'm going to be a hindrance.
Right.
That was the feeling I kind of had going into this project, that everyone in my hometown was going to be super busy. No one wanted, we were going to be in the way.
Right.
It was also, we had to film at a certain time of the year because it was corn harvest, and that takes that's in the plot. So we had a window that we had to shoot, and I was just going to be in everybody's way. I was going to be a hindrance. Everybody couldn't wait till I left. And I couldn't have had a more opposite experience than that. I just like had convinced myself that that's what was going to happen. And in the end, I found out that like more people wanted to help than I even involved in the process. Like they wanted to help. They wanted to know about it. They wanted to be asked, and they were super excited.
Isn't it? I think it is so true. Because I had that experience on both my feature films I shot, that things just started to just show up. Throughout my career, I felt that, like, when you're on a production and just something just shows up, and just all of a sudden, and I think it's very true. The old saying is that when you jump, a net will appear, but you got to jump first. And the jumping is the scary part, but you started going down this road, and all of a sudden a lot of things happened and continued through your distribution as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, first of all, how did you create your local theatrical run before you got full-blown distribution? Because there's a little story there as well.
There is, yeah. So it's kind of crazy because I'll just kind of take a step back, talk about how we kind of came about having a producer's rep and kind of getting repped, and then how we kind of led into our theatrical run. We ran the 2017 film festival circuit. We had, some success. I used the Movie Maker top 50 festivals worth the entry fee kind of as like my guide. I think a lot of people do. We got into 3 of those festivals at a total of 5 festivals. So I was, pretty happy with that. We didn't like spend a lot of, we didn't do the scattershot approach, as much as we could have. So I was a little bit more focused. We got into 5 festivals. I was pretty happy with that. And I had actually been listening to your podcast, and I heard Ben Yenny from Guerrilla Rep Media come on to your podcast, and he was talking about AFM and a book that he had written about AFM. And so during this time where we were submitting to film festivals, I got on Amazon, I got his book, and I read it cover to cover, and I just reached out to him on Twitter, and I was just like, hey, read your book. It was great information, kind of thanks for putting that together. And then we kind of started talking, and Ben, if you get a lot of unsolicited material sent to you after this.
Oh no, I'm sure Ben won't be happy. Look, Ben was on episode number 15 of this podcast. So he's one of the very first guests I had on the podcast. So he's very dear to my heart because of that. Because when I was, just starting out, he was willing to jump on my podcast. And I can't tell you, that was over 3 years ago. And he still gets calls all the time from that episode, which is, I'm like, which blows my mind, because it's like, that's from 3 years ago. So I just literally talked to him at AFM the other day, and I'm like, dude, we got to get you back on, man. Like, we got to refresh the situation.
Right. He'll love it. Yeah. Yeah. So we started talking. I sent him, we had a trailer out at that time. I sent him the trailer. He liked what he saw. I went through the process of going to his website. You can submit your material through his website. So I did the full process. There was no shoe-in per se. So he actually watched the film, liked the film, got him on board to be a producer rep. And then when we were working out the contract and the deal, I had been asked, there's a one screen theater in my hometown, the Sherman Theater. And it's near and dear to my heart. It's where I grew up going to see movies. It's where I saw all the most important movies in my life.
Of course.
And they, were very interested. I talked to the owner, knew the owner my entire life. He owned the theater as long as I had been going to the theater. So I talked to him, and we wanted to do some screenings there, but I didn't know what capacity I could promise or how we could do that. Until I had, our distribution locked in and everything. So when I was talking to Ben, I was like, hey, I want to do this, run in my hometown. It's really important to me. And Ben was like, yeah, you can totally hold back theatrical. Goodland's probably not going to land in a lot of theaters, or any theaters really, unless we four-wall it. So you can hold back theatrical. And I was like, okay, great. So held back theatrical, told him what my plan was, set up a 2-week run at the local theater in Goodland. And we were all set to go. Everything was like looking good. And our run coincided about within like a week of AFM happening in 2017. So Ben's at AFM. I'm in my hometown preparing for this 2-week theatrical run where I'm doing introductions and Q&As after every screening. And just kind of getting everything ready. I'm doing like local press, I'm going on like local radio stations and talking to local paper and all of that, getting people excited, and everybody was excited. And then Ben calls me and he says, we may have a problem. And I said, oh no. I was like, what is this problem? He goes, they want theatrical rights. The distributor wants theatrical rights, and that's like every filmmaker's dream to hear that. Sure. And I'm a day away from a 2-week commitment.
Of course, and I'm sure everybody's waiting for it. It's going to be a premiere. It's going to be a thing. Yeah,
and I must have just like turned white, on the phone with Ben, because I was like, this is like, I can't believe this is happening.
Sure.
And, Ben and I talked it out, and, we didn't want to necessarily go back to the distributor and tell them, no, you can't have theatrical rights, or that, this is more important. And in the long run, it definitely seems like, signing over the theatrical rights and everything with them, would be, the best thing we could possibly do. And ultimately I talked it over with Ben, and I thought about it, and I slept on it, and I told him that essentially I couldn't break the deal with my local theater because I had already committed to that. I was excited about it. So many people were excited about it. And
the people who helped you make this movie want to see it.
Yeah.
So, right. Absolutely.
And so I couldn't do it. And it was with a heavy heart that I made that phone call to Ben, and Ben understood. Comes from a small town as well. He took that to the distributor, and they said, no worries. That's okay.
I was kind of like, in the back of my head, I'm like, dude, it's not a big deal. You're like talking about a local theater in Goodland, Kansas.
Right.
I think you're going to be okay. It's not going to interfere with your theatrical run of the U.S. I think.
And that's what we were totally, they wanted, basically, we wanted some basically to report the true opening weekend numbers was the reason that we thought that it may get into a process, or be a problem. And it doesn't seem like that big of a thing, but it was a commitment that I made, and I was afraid that they were just going to tell me to pull the plug.
That's what we like to call a test. That is like when the universe is like, okay, we gave him all this stuff. Let's see if he does the right thing now, or if not, we're going to have to crash and burn this entire thing to the ground.
And it would have been a huge karmic.
Yes. Mucho karma.
Sure.
Mucho karma would have been on your path, sir. But that's great, man. So great. So you had a theatrical run, and it did fairly well in Goodland.
Yeah,
I'm assuming that's a target market.
We did really good in the hometown theater. We ran for 2 weeks. It was actually held over for our third week.
Mm-hmm. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And we had, big numbers. It was their biggest film of the year. I mean, the movie was called Goodland. I'm not saying it's the biggest cinematic event of the year, but people came out to see it.
I'm assuming someone's going to go out to see that at Goodland.
There was, I was going and introducing the film, coming out. I would hang out in the lobby with the people working the concession stands, and then going and do the Q&A because I'd seen the film 100 times before it even got there. I didn't sit and watch through the 2 weeks. And I went out one night and someone called and asked the movie theater what was playing, and they told them Goodland. And the person on the other end hadn't heard of the movie or didn't know anything about it. And they said, "I asked what's playing, not the name of the town." And they just got calls like that
constantly. I'm sure. I'm sure.
A little bit of confusion on even though it's a small town, not everybody knew what was going on.
So then, what was your distribution plan for the film?
So distribution ended up, we signed with Parade Deck and Ammo Content, and it ended up being like more than I ever thought could happen. Before signing Ben, we are seriously considering self-distribution, which is, a very, especially now,
mm-hmm.
it's a very viable, a way to go. And I was excited about, thinking about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But then after talking to Ben and gauging interest, we were going to gauge interest before we even decided which way we were going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then Parade Deck came in, and they ended up offering us a small independent theatrical run. I think we were in 5 cities over the course of a couple months in the summer. It was kind of a scattered release just based on availability and open screens at different
mm-hmm.
places. And then after that, we went onto DVD. We got into family video. We had a trial run at Redbox. We then
what's family video? Is that a
family video is like a blockbuster. That's
what I've heard of. I think because it rings like there is it's still around, right?
Right. Yeah. I think it might be primarily Midwest.
It's like it's not everywhere. It's a small local area, but it is. Right. I remember that is a thing still.
Yeah,
there.
It's still a thing. Yeah, there's still a chain of video stores that exists in America. So
that's so awesome. It just warms my heart as an ex-video store employee.
I know. I was an ex-video store employee as well, and I actually I live in Nashville now. My production company is still in Kansas City. I commute often. I was on a drive back and forth, and I saw that there was a family video near Kansas City. I pulled off and checked, and I found the Goodland DVD there. It was really see your work like in a video store. There's not many of them left.
That's such a cool feeling, man. That's such a cool feeling. So then you have done very well with the distribution?
Yeah, and then so now we are streaming. You can rent or buy on Amazon. The DVD is available on Amazon as well. We'll be in the DVD will be in Walmart after the first of the year, end of January. And then as of the 1st of December, we'll be streaming on Showtime. There's Showtime anytime. And then I believe I just saw today that on December 3rd, we'll be on Showtime at 3:30 p.m.
So wait a minute. You got a Showtime deal. You got a paid cable deal.
We got a paid cable deal, yeah. And that's
with no stars. With no stars.
No stars, yeah.
No stars. With a movie called Goodland from Goodland, Kansas.
Right.
There's no excuse for anybody not to be able to make money with a movie nowadays. I mean, come on.
That's what I'm saying. And I have to give it to everybody. Asks me what my experience with my distributor is. I've heard horror stories, being in this industry for 10 years. And I can't say enough great things about who we went with. And, it just felt like a match from the beginning. So I've been really, really pleased with our distribution.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now, is there any tips you can give filmmakers who are thinking of going down this path of kind of like community filmmaking, if we can coin a term, of putting your whole community together to kind of back and help to get a film make? Is there any tips you can give?
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about being honest, whatever your project is. Maybe just like whatever the scope of the project is, I've always found that it's easier to be honest, or even like overestimate people's time or commitment, or overestimate their time and commitment as opposed to underestimate. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be in a location and you know that you're scheduled there for 12 hours, but it's an indie film set and you're understaffed and you have no money, like, let them know the situation. Let them know that, like, they may say you have a hard out and there's nothing you can do about that. But I would say be respectful. Let them know how the process goes. Like we were saying, not everybody knows what it's like to be on a film set or how long things take. Mm-hmm. If you ask people to show up and be extras or do anything, let them know that it's going to be a full day thing. Let them know that it's a commitment. Let them know that you're going to, if you borrow a vehicle, like, make sure that they know what you're going to be doing with it. You know, don't attempt to do any like high speed chase scenes. You told them you were going to leave it parked. You know, I think just like honesty first and foremost is probably, I mean, at any level, obviously, mm-hmm. At this local level, especially, where I think in the film industry, people know a little bit more how to gauge if you're being lied to or not, maybe sometimes,
don't overestimate that. I know a lot of people in LA have no idea when they're being lied to, and they're sitting around for 3 years. Like, everyone keeps saying my script is great and they want to work with me, but I'm not getting any calls. So
that's true. I would say be open, be honest. When you're asking for things, make it known exactly what you're asking for and what you need it for. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that relates specifically to this. I guess also be willing to talk about the project and ask for things. Like, as I was saying, I went and talked at a city council meeting. We got an entire block of Main Street shut down for an entire day to shoot on this awesome old school brick Main Street, a small town Americana look that I wanted so bad in my film. And I just had to ask. And so I think that people are very receptive to upfront requests, I guess,
Well, it is an inspirational story, to say the least, man. That's why I wanted you on the show, because it's a story that I have not quite heard of before. I mean, obviously with Robert, but that was like a one-off. You're like, well, who else is going to have a Mexican town that they can shoot in? Right. So, and to see a real life example of that in today's world is a really great thing. So thank you for to sharing your experience with us. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests, as you know.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give filmmakers trying to break into the business today?
Just keep going. When you start making things, it's not going to be good. And hopefully you have people who don't tell you that right away. I think that's really necessary. Is like, you have to believe in yourself and what you're doing, even if it's not great. And I remember the first short films I made in college, I didn't understand why they weren't getting hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. And I look back at them now and I'm like, I can't believe I even put that on YouTube. And so I think that you just really have to like believe in what you're doing and keep doing it. And then eventually, as you start to figure out the industry and what's going on, and you start watching things, you start comparing things, you obviously, there's a learning curve. You have to also rise to the occasion. You need to learn the entire time that you keep making things. And eventually, as you keep doing more and more and more stuff, you're going to pick up little tips and tricks and pay attention to those things. I have a notes document that's like 10 pages long on all the mistakes I made on Goodland, so that on my next film, I won't do that again. Nice. I have if I do, I have a document that will call me out on it. I'll be like, oh yeah, page 3 says don't do that.
Awesome. And can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
This is a two-part answer. One we've already talked about, so that's the easy one. I think a lot of people.
Robert Rodriguez, yeah.
Robert Rodriguez, Rebel Without a Crew, just for the practical standpoint of making something with little to no money and not waiting for permission, because I knew that I didn't want to have a script and circulate it around and like get notes for 5 years. I just wanted to go, do the first one. But the second one is Sidney Lumet's Making Movies.
Yeah, it's a great book, man. I love that book.
I revisit that. I've only made one feature, but I plan on revisiting that text.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Before I go into every new production, it's something that I would like to do because I think he really lays it out for you in a way that I really hadn't thought about film when I first read that book when I was probably like 19 or 20 years old. And then I read it again before Goodland, and it made me think about the pre-production of film in a way that I hadn't. And then also just the production of like how lenses can change the meaning of a shot, or how a camera move can tell the story. Things that I think a lot of people, now it's just kind of, you get your actors in a room and you can shoot coverage and then you can edit it together later. But he really drills in that like directing is deciding on that stuff beforehand and then not necessarily sticking. You always have to be ready to adapt and change and
compromise
on set. But I do think that really changed the way I looked at it. And I would love to do rehearsals the way he does. And in the book, he talks about getting his entire cast together and going through almost like 3 weeks of rehearsals before production rolls. But that's not really feasible on an indie level, or even in today's like schedule with
actors.
You just can't do that.
If you're Sidney Lumet, if you're Francis Ford Coppola, if you're Steven Spielberg, you get these things.
Yeah.
Other than that,
for us to aspire to, right?
Exactly. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
Longest to learn in the film industry or life? Wow. I think that, I think in the film industry, like I was kind of saying, I think it took me a long time to realize that, especially nowadays with how easy it is becoming to make films, that like you're not really, just because you make something, you're not owed anything. If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes absolute yes, because as a filmmaker, you make art, and now I expect accolades. I expect Sundance. I expect a check from a Hollywood mogul so I can get my career. I expect it all.
Right. Yeah, I think that took a while for me to learn. It took a while for me to learn that it's not 1993 anymore. I'm not, I'm not. You can't make a award-winning short film and get a 3-picture deal with Warner Brothers anymore.
Not so much. And you can't even make a $27,000 movie about clerks in a video store and in a convenience store and get a deal at Miramax. Like it doesn't work that way anymore. But that was a magical time. That was a magical time.
It was, and there's a lot of literature on it, so you can go back and relive those moments. And if you read the right or wrong books, depending on what your perspective is, you can be fooled into thinking that may still be the case. And the landscape has just changed so much, and you just got to keep up with it. And I heard, I won't even be able to attribute to who said this, but someone was talking about how, they're saying like having a college degree is now like having a high school degree 10 years ago. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you a job. I think the same thing is true in the film industry now. And unfortunately, it used to be like, if you were able to make a feature and had a feature film, you were on your way. And now having a feature film is about like having a short film, 10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
And that like, it doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't even guarantee meetings anymore.
Oh God, no. I mean, it has a little bit more weight than a short film. Right. It might open a door or two here and there. You have a viable product that you can sell still, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like before, if you just got a movie made, you were getting meetings, you were getting deals. just purely on the fact of getting it made. And going back to your earlier comment in regards to the 90s kind of myths that were created back then, it took me 40 years till I made my first feature because I was stuck in that mentality. And it was just such a glorious time. It was pretty much from like 89 to like 97, 98, like that whole decade was just every year, wasn't it? Like every year a new Linklater, Soderbergh, Rodriguez, Tarantino, Spike Lee, like they all were just popping out like water. It was insane. Right. It was an insane time. And now, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
3 favorite films of all time. Okay, I'm gonna go with. Okay, so let's start with Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay. Popular on the podcast.
That is kind of a cliche thing, but I think it goes back to just like when you're a kid and you don't know what movies are, and you have a VHS copy of something, and it just goes in constantly. It's just always, getting played over and over and over and over again. And then something that you can probably see some influence for sure in Goodland. We'll go down that road. No Country for Old Men.
Yeah,
I think that script is just like pitch perfect, and it just hit at a time that was like really important to me. I was working at a video store when that and There Will Be Blood came out, and it was just like towards the end of my high school years, and I was ready to, go off to college and make movies like that. So I think that one. And then another one, it's another very popular movie, but it's something that I would like to get into. And I think the tone of this film is very, very hard to hit and land on. And is Men in Black. The first Men in Black, the comedy sci-fi combo and the smart script that they had to back up, what essentially is kind of a comedic action buddy film, I think is like super impressive. And
that's a great movie. It's a great movie.
And I've heard the screenwriter on several podcasts and the struggle. I think sometimes the story behind the film as well influences what is my favorite film of the week or the time. But him talking about the struggle to get Men in Black, he was like hired and fired like 4 times or something in the process of getting that film made and everything that he had to go through and what, how many drafts he had to go through and where it finally landed is just kind of an inspiring story. And it's one of those stories that's like, your first draft shouldn't be necessarily what you go to set with.
No, definitely should.
He pitches his first draft or the first draft of the story on a podcast I listened to. And I'm trying to picture if Men in Black was that movie, I probably wouldn't even like it. And because he had to rewrite it so many times, it ended up being the film that it is.
That's awesome, man. Now, where can people find you, your work, and your film?
So I'm on Twitter at JW Doke. I'm not super active, but I'm there. But you can also on Facebook find Goodland. Just search Goodland movie. Goodlandmovie.com is our website as well. But primarily Facebook is where we do most of our interaction.
Okay. Very cool, man. Well, listen, Josh, thank you again so much for being on the show. It's been an inspirational conversation, to say the least.
Well, thanks for having me on.
There is no excuse if you want to make a movie, and Josh is a perfect example of that. Josh, thank you again so much for coming on and dropping the knowledge bombs on the tribe today, sir. Even if you can't afford to get everything done by yourself, man, get the community out, get help, find people who are interested in making your movie with you. And believe it, I live in Los Angeles, but there's a lot of places around the world that when you tell people that you're making a movie, they get really excited, and you'll be surprised at what you're able to get from them, how they can help you, locations, vehicles, food, a lot of different things can happen when you tell people you're making a movie or you're making a show or something along those lines. So definitely reach out for help, guys. Believe me, there are people out there that will be more than willing to help you make your movie. Now, again, I do apologize for my voice today, guys. I'm doing the best I can. I'm listening back as I'm recording this, and it doesn't sound like me. But hey, I'm here, and we're gonna want to get you guys this fresh content this week. So, also, if you guys are interested in watching the video podcast version of this episode, it will be at the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/285. We'll put links to the movie Goodland, everything that we talked about in this episode, as well as contact information for Josh and all of the stuff that he's doing as well. And if you guys haven't done it already, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave us a good review on iTunes. It really, really helps the show out a lot. Thank you again, guys, for listening so much. I got so many things cooking for you guys in the coming weeks and in 2019. January is going to be an insane year. And also, by the way, don't forget, in January, at the end of January, the introductory price for Indie Film Hustle TV will go away forever. It will jump from $10.99 to $13.99 a month regular, and it will jump $20 a year as well for the year-long pass. So if you guys are interested at all in Indie Film Hustle TV, within now before February 1st, you got to jump on it, all right? And that way you are locked in at that price as long as you stay a member. So thanks again, guys, for everything and all the support. I can't wait to tell you all the insane stuff I'm working on. But alas, that is the end of this episode. So as always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.